Hello, and welcome back to the Reflexology Exchange, the podcast where we explore the depth, nuance, and evolving practice of reflexology, not just as a treatment, but as a relationship between practitioner and client. Today's conversation feels particularly important because we're diving into something that many reflexologists feel every day in clinic, but don't always have the language or tools to fully understand. And that's energetic exchange. When we're working with clients, we're not just working physically through the feet. We're holding space, we're sensing, we're often absorbing, and sometimes we're leaving sessions feeling either deeply nourished or unexpectedly depleted. I know I've had both. So how do we understand what's actually happening in that exchange? And more importantly, how do we protect and regulate our own energy so we can sustain this work long term? To explore this, I'm joined by Sanya Sheikh, now shaman, astrologer, and coach, after 20 years in the corporate world. Sanya helps women see what's in their way so clearly they can't help but attract the clients they want and build a thriving, energetically aligned business without the struggle. That sounds pretty amazing. Sanya, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Hi, Meg. Really excited to be here.
So the first question I ask every single guest is, reflexologists come to the practice usually after a big life change or event. And I'm just curious, what was the big life event or change that led you to where you are now?
Yeah, great question. I think that there were many. I don't always necessarily think that there's going to be one thing that pivots somebody completely. So for me, it would be two experiences. One was more inadvertent. I didn't realize I was putting myself on the path, if you like, at the time. And one was a little bit more obvious. Many years before I actually became a shaman, I had a conversation with my mother where I mentioned that I actually wanted to leave the world. I was finished with it. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I decided against it. And then I thought about, what can I do with this, just the sense of loneliness I felt? And I decided that I would choose something that was, I could do alone, but wouldn't mean that I was lonely. And so I chose meditation. I'd already been meditating, but I became very serious about it at that point. And many years later, it was through my meditative practice that my guides came in and called me into shamanhood, if you like. So that was a pretty pivotal moment. And the other moment was what a lot of people on the path experience, which is a sort of a near-death experience, if you like, where at the end of it, you come out and you realize that you were blessed and protected through it.
I mean, that's such a powerful introduction, and thank you so much for sharing that. It's really interesting. We've also had someone called Gary Waters on the podcast, and he also had a moment of wanting to end his life, and that it's led him to the work that he does. That's episode 2 for anyone who's interested in going back and listening. And I feel like there are these really powerful moments that set us on this beautiful path. And I know the work that you do, Sonia, is amazing. So I know I'm really excited to dive a bit more into it. I'm so interested in what you said about how you met your guides. And I would love just to ask, maybe for those who don't know your work, what you mean by that.
Yeah, so there are different ways in which we can meet our guides, if you like. So for somebody, for example, who's part of my membership, I take them on shamanic journeys. You meet your animal spirits, your guides. There are the guidance system in the spirit world can be quite complex. So technically everybody has a guide. It is true to say that if you keep sort of denying the connection, you may have a guide step away for a while until you're ready to reconnect with them. In my case, I evolved and kept pushing spirit away, if you like, through my path from the moment I had that conversation with my mum. It sort of culminated in spirit pushing back, and that does happen. There are a growing number of initiations out there. People, women especially, who are being called into service. And in that case, in my case, the guides came to me. They appeared before me and asked me to step into their world. And so there's, I just wanted to sort of give you the whole spectrum, because that's not going to be happening for everybody. It doesn't mean you can't contact a guide. It doesn't mean you don't have guides. It just means that you would communicate with them and contact them differently.
What I love about what you just said, Sanya, is that you did message me before we were going back and forth about preparing for this podcast. And you were like, I wonder how deep I should go. And I said, do not worry. You're in safe hands here. And I know actually just even listening to you talking about the guys just then, how much that will resonate with the reflexology community. There are so many people out there who have had an initiation, had a moment in time where they have been called into service. And maybe they didn't know that yet. And so the fact that you've named it just then is really powerful. So thank you for that. So one of the first questions I had for you, given the fact that this podcast is all about energy and energetic exchanges, when we talk about energy in a therapeutic setting, what are we actually referring to?
Yeah, I think the term that you used is, grounded and real when we were going back and forth. And it's so interesting to me because for me, it's all grounded and real because everything is energy. There is no differentiation. So it's as much the person in front of you as the chair they're sitting on, as the conversation you're having, but also the way that you've set up the container, the way that you've priced and sort of created your offer, for example, the way that you lead the person into the container well before it even starts. All of that is part of the energy in a therapeutic setting. Energy is seamless, it's coherent, it's fully connected, it can't disconnect itself. So there is no therapeutic setting, as it were. There's a service that you're providing, but the energy you bring to that predates it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it is very true how a lot of reflexologists, people spend time in the space, in the welcoming, but also the fact that you've just mentioned, it's almost before, it precedes that. It's before that. It's the way that you've set up your business, the way that you've come to the practice with your intention. And from your perspective, what is happening between practitioner and client beneath the surface during the session itself? So we've had the preamble. They've, created a beautiful space. They've invited the client in, but within that session and the touching of the foot or the hands and the face, what is happening there?
Yeah, that's such an amazing question because so we all have a field. Everything resides in the field, right? It is from which all things arise. That's why I call my membership the field, because it literally is, in many ways, the totality. And in that moment, when you are with somebody in your session, your two fields are interacting in a more pronounced way. So because everything is connected, even though we are in different locations, our fields are interacting, right? And science is only just kind of catching up to this. So when you're in a session with your client, you're essentially in each other's field and those two fields are having a conversation. We do this all the time. Like, it might sound a strange thing to say that you're intermingling with somebody else's field, but we do it all the time with strangers, with friends, with family. It's, it's essentially just a giving and receiving an exchange of energy. And a lot of it, most of it is happening completely unconsciously because the majority of our communication is completely unconscious. It's not something that we're thinking about. So in many ways, I call it an energetic entanglement in some ways. That's kind of what's happening momentarily. And then it's a question of whether one can separate oneself cleanly from that.
Interesting. So when you talk about separating yourself cleanly, it's almost you've come in together in this beautiful exchange, and then how you remove yourself is almost as important as how you bring yourself in. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. It's a question of, it's about the boundary that you set. So when I'm talking about the therapeutic setting and I'm saying that, well, everything kind of predates the therapeutic setting, I think you mentioned earlier that the intention that you come to reflexology with has a lot to do with how you show up in the container. And for me, the intention is just the conscious part. It's like the tip of the iceberg for the real reason you will have chosen or been chosen for this particular path. And sometimes the reasons why we arrive at a place of helping or supporting others can be less than helpful or supportive to ourselves. I'm responsible for other people. I have to save other people. Other people need to be okay around me. For example, just like 3 examples. And in those cases, being clear about what is the therapeutic setting and what isn't when it's over, when you can finalize that entanglement, is really important.
I'd love to talk a bit more about boundary setting later, but I think you've brought up a really interesting point here, which is that a lot of reflexologists do come at it because of this desire to heal, and the fact that that energy sometimes can mean we're giving a lot of energy to client, and it can also mean that a lot of reflexologists have that empathy that can sometimes mean that they take a lot in too. So some reflexologists say to me, oh, I just went to this client and I felt so like I was buzzing afterwards. It was absolutely amazing. Or on the other side, I felt completely depleted. And I've definitely had that. I've had one particular client where I got there and I put my hands on her feet and it was like I couldn't keep my eyes open. I was just falling asleep. And I'm wondering why that happens. Is it because reflexologists come very open and wanting to support and therefore maybe haven't got that boundary up, or is there something else going on energetically?
So one of the really interesting things about reflexology specifically is that the part of the body you're dealing with, the feet, astrologically speaking, that's ruled by Pisces. Pisces is ruled by Neptune. And Pisces, we all have it in our chart. So if you're a Pisces sun or moon or rising, I'm not talking to you specifically, just saying in general, we all have Pisces somewhere in our chart. And Pisces is the energy of several things, many things, but one of those things is escape. It's escape. It's where we want to escape things. It's where we want to merge with the other. And it's where we hide. And so I'm sure you or people who are listening will have touched somebody's foot, and what that person is presenting themselves at is saying something completely different to what you're actually feeling in the foot. I can just imagine how common that experience is. And so you're sort of dealing with one of the most porous parts of the body. So given the feet is one of the most porous places that, we have energetically, and in fact, when I'm doing a shamanic practice, it is the place I go to get an understanding of the person's energetic sense of self. And then at the end of the practice, that's the place I come back to understand the real transformation that's occurred. And what you can see from the feet is a reflection of that person's internal sense of self. It's super fascinating. So, you're working with something incredibly powerful, like a real portal into that person's being. Now, it's also true to say that people, especially if they're more beholden to their ego, especially if they are perhaps a little bit more unconscious of their own stuff, they will have a tendency to leak. Leak, deflect, deny. It's not that anyone means to do this. Most of the time, people are wholly unconscious that they're doing it. However, if you're in a situation where you mentioned earlier that a reflexologist may arrive with the desire to really serve and help, and the person in the chair, I'm assuming, is somebody who wants to deny an experience that they're having because they just can't handle it. They want to escape it. They want to hide from it. That's a great place for them to offload. Now, discharge is really what I call it. It's not going to be permanent. It's their energy. They can't outrun themselves. But it does mean that it can have temporary repercussions for the energy around them. And you can see that everywhere. Somebody turns up in a really bad mood and a previously calm environment becomes charged. It happens all the time. So that's what's happening there. It's not as clear cut as the person is just dumping their stuff on you, because you're also part of the entanglement. So it is a case of, well, what are you willing to accept? What are you taking on? And that can be very confronting for people to hear, that there might be a permissive undertone in what's going on with them.
That's so powerful for this audience, because there is a lot of conversation about taking a client's energy on, making sure you wash your hands after to take away make sure that you've cleansed yourself of that energy, when actually what I'm hearing is it's a two-way exchange, and us understanding ourselves better as a reflexologist. This isn't actually just taking on a client's energy. It's potentially more about how our system's responding to them individually.
Yeah. So our system does not respond to something it doesn't accept. So anyone can go back to a time in their life where they've been complimented on something and they don't believe that compliment. And it's almost impossible to say thank you. You'll come back with everything. Oh, it's just this old thing. I just bought it. Oh, well, actually my hair's a mess, whatever it is, because we cannot respond to something we don't accept. And so really the game and the powerful thing for everybody listening is that in many ways you are in control of what you allow within your field. You may not be in control in terms of the literal proximity of two fields meeting, but you're certainly in control of what you allow to land and what can reside in you, what can come inside you and kind of like take up residence.
What does healthy, energetic boundary actually look like in a body-based practice like reflexology?
Yeah, great question. So boundaries are one of my favorite topics because they're pure energy. And I do hear things from, I sort of watch other reels or my clients come to me and say, another coach has said XYZ, and it's often around stating something. And yes, your voice is powerful. What you declare is powerful, but energy supersedes all of it. In fact, it gives rise to it. So if you are, for example, trying to create a healthy boundary by saying to a client, I only respond between 9 and 5, and then somebody calls up with an emergency, and you are, your natural response is, oh, I must help that person because they're struggling and it's my job to help them, then there's a way in which you're not in integrity with your own boundary. So I mentioned astrology and Neptune and Pisces. And so anytime in astrology, a lot of the stuff is around resonance, right? Well, in the universe, the law of resonance, a lot of things are about the resonance and evoking an energy. And because reflexology is aligned to the feet, which is aligned to Pisces and Neptune, there is a tendency for boundary breaking because there's a tendency for dissolution into the whole. And so I think it's really important for reflexologists in particular, or maybe podiatrists, anybody working with feet, to be very aligned and to understand, how am I creating a boundary and why am I creating the boundary? Because if you're creating it out of protection or artificially because you should or you must, it's not going to be able to hold. And then there are other practical things you can do to create more of a boundary, which is, for example, clearing your space, ensuring it feels like a professional atmosphere, ensuring that the way that you welcome somebody, and I think a lot of reflexologists must work in the home as well, ensuring that that entire exchange is kind of crisp in its tone, so that there is a natural energetic alliance towards you're the practitioner, I am the client, as opposed to becoming too enmeshed or immersed in each other, because that's definitely a possibility just with the energy that reflexology evokes.
I'd love to go back to what you said about working with the feet can evoke that sort of osmosis of energy exchange. And I think that I feel like some reflexologists' shoulders might drop at that point, because people are out there going, oh, but I'm such an empath and it's on me. And actually the empowerment that I felt hearing that, to go, okay, so I'm working in something which actually has the tendency to allow overflow of energetic exchange, means that I can work with that and understand that, and therefore make sure that my practice supports me. And I think sometimes we spend a lot of time going, oh, it's me, I'm the empathetic one, I'm the people pleaser, and label ourselves, rather than understand what you've just said, which feels like a bit of a mic drop moment for reflexologists. I wonder how many people will actually know that, especially about it being, the feet being within Pisces is really powerful, right? Like understanding this deeper layer of what we do, and therefore how we can support ourselves is amazing. What are the signs for practitioners can look for if they're starting to get dysregulated energetically? Are there specific signs that people can look for? Is it really individual to the practitioner or the person themselves?
Yeah, so I think that they're just sort of basic dysregulation signs. So feeling drowsy, feeling tired, feeling as though you are drained, feeling anxious, feeling fear, feeling hopeless. Often especially if you have a busy practice, you're not necessarily going to understand what's happening until it's already happening, if you like. And at that point, you could find yourself mulling over a particular session. You could find yourself feeling triggered by somebody, the way that they behave, the way that they speak. You could find yourself thinking that somebody is asking more of you non-verbally, meaning they haven't actually said that they want more, you're just sensing it. At that point, the entanglement has moved beyond the moment of the session. And now it is, up to you to support yourself to ensure a level of clarity. What you look for is process and detail, not leaving things, practitioners not leaving things open and unsaid. Practitioners not leaving things with the expectation that that a client's going to understand something without it being fully defined, or even that the client will understand something if it is fully defined. So ensuring that everything, that's why I'm using crisp and clear, ensuring everything is detailed and extremely not process oriented, but that you are clear of your own processes. And that includes around empathy. So you mentioned the empathic nature of healers. One of the things that I teach people, which I think is so important, is learning to turn the volume down. And I can see from your breath there that you're like, I can just turn the volume down. Yay! Learning to turn the volume down is incredibly important because it isn't all on you. And approaching your practice from that place means that you're approaching, to some degree, life from that place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to say it. I will give an example, as you've shown such beautiful vulnerability. And I had a reflexology client recently, and I went to her home, and she was lying there, and everything was really calm. And then she kind of got up and checked her phone, and then she lay back down again, and then she got up and she go, I'm going to put some music on. And the noise in me of like, she's not enjoying the session. She's distracted. What can I do? What can I do? And of course, she's booked another session. But the noise within my head, which then obviously I know for like 15 minutes of that session before I became aware, because even someone like me who, I've done some work, but sometimes it can take 15, 20 minutes for us all to become aware of what's going on in our head. The ability to be able to turn the noise down, I think, will really help reflexologists, because we spend a lot of time in silence. Clients usually close their eyes. Some clients talk at us, and that's also their choice. But there's a lot of time in silence. You've got an hour of sitting there kind of with the propensity to overanalyze what's going on potentially, and hearing a lot of stuff in your head. So I think that'll be really powerful. I've got another story for you actually about the energy osmosis, which is I was doing a reflexology session with someone, and I was thinking about someone whilst doing the treatment. This person popped into my head, and then my client opened his eyes and was like, I don't know why, but this person with brown hairs popped into my head. And it was literally like this thought had kind of passed through the feet and into him. And I smiled at that point, and I was like, wow, that's really amazing. So I wonder whether anyone else listening, and please do comment when we post this on Instagram, whether you felt the same, has actually had that kind of experience before.
Meg, I'd love to just talk to that for a second, if I
Yeah.
may. So in shamanism, we have this idea of the hollow bone. And it's something that I hope any healer can relate to. And the idea is that I don't heal. When I'm doing any kind of healing, I'm not healing. I'm simply the hollow bone through which source passes. And it's a kind of a strange experience for a human to kind of set themselves aside and allow something to pass through them. But it's, again, in terms of resonance, and we've sort of moved into a bit more of the astrological understanding of it. So Neptune is very connected to the divine. If you are somebody who has your processes down and you're very clear, and yet you're still in a slightly sort of liminal space sometimes with your client, to move to a very Neptunian way of connecting to presence, to the divine, the creative source that can flow through you, and moving yourself out of the way is another way to manage some of the noise, as you put it, in your own mind.
That's really helpful. We had this podcast with Gary Waters previously, so people can go to episode 2, and we talk exactly about what the word healer sometimes shooting us in the foot a bit. And I'm sure you have the same, which is that by calling yourself a healer, you're going and believing that all the power's in you to solve someone else. whereas actually that's not the case. And you call it the hollow bone, is that right? It's a beautiful image of how we are there to support someone's own journey. I was going to say healing journey, but actually just their own journey. And I train reflexologists, and I talk a lot about the fact that there is a tendency for some people out there to say, oh, I get you pregnant. As a reflexologist, I get you pregnant. I induce your birth, or even I help induce your birth. But even those subtle words are making it sound like we are the ones who are in control of what's going on inside that person, rather than this beautiful image of the hollow bone of allowing the energy to pass through. I think is really powerful. You've supported me just now with my own stories, and I think that goes really nicely to one of the final questions I had for you, which is how much of what we experience in client work, my story included, about worrying about my client not enjoying herself, is actually our own nervous system, our unresolved patterns being activated?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because I think the tendency now, especially through mediums like Instagram, is to have a definitive take. And the fact is that energy, human nature, is much more complicated. So it is both a literal, practical, energetic entanglement that nobody can deny, if you like. If you're standing next to somebody, you are involved with each other. If you're thinking about somebody, you are involved with each other. There's a relationship happening there. And then there is the who am I and how am I relating to myself and my surroundings? So I've talked about the permissive nature of allowing things to happen, and the idea of consent, which, like I said, can be really confronting for people. The more you step into the idea that you are the healer, the more that you step into the idea that it's up to me, the more your own sense of self is going to be entangled with the outcome necessarily. So I'll share a story with you about when I first started healing, if you like. And a few of the lessons I had to learn really quickly is that if the person does not want to be healed, nothing I do will make it so. People will block their own healing, and that just speaks to the intrinsic power of the client, right? In another setting, that client is an expert and you're the client. It's really important to recognize that being in the position of the provider of something, in this case, reflexology, doesn't place you in a position of energetic power, so to say. The more your ego is entangled with that, the more tricky it will be for you to do all of the above, maintain the boundaries, actually have a thriving practice, for example. The other thing that can get in the way, and I might be heading in a totally different direction, and that is karma. If it is not the person's karma to receive their healing at the moment, that will be stored and it will happen when it's time. And so there's a lot of other things at play that can step in and sort of take over. When I first started healing, I would go in there myself. So I heal remotely. I call the person's energy to me, and I create an energetic container where they are. But I would practically go into their energy field and remove things. And it's taken me time and a lot of lessons to now be in a different room while my spirit team does the work and I just hold the space. The reason why that needs to happen, because you might be like, well, then why don't just my guides come through and do it for me? Not everybody has guides who are part of a healing team, and the energy that comes through is so powerful, a human being is required to be the conduit in order to keep it on a kind of a three-dimensional earthly plane.
It's so powerful to understand that there's so much more going on when you're connecting with someone, and what you're doing is kind of that next level there, isn't it? I do work with Sanya. I'm part of Sanya's membership, which we'll speak about later. And what Sanya's saying here sounds maybe radical to some, but your ability to see people, because you've done that with me, you've done a sort of mini astro reading for me, and your ability to see someone and see their don't know if soul is the right thing to say, but like the sort of like energy within the world, I think is really powerful. So for those who'd love to know more about what you do, can you just explain how you work with women in particular?
So I work in a very multifaceted way, as you can probably tell by the multi-layers in which I'm sort of speaking. It is true to say that I do see things. I have 8 of the 9 clair abilities in a literal sense. So it's very easy for me to both be guided and intuit what that person requires at that moment in accordance with whatever I'm being asked to intuit. I work blending shamanic work, energy work with astrology, and what I call symbolism. Really, everybody internally has their own cosmology. They have their own archetypes. They have their own internal myth, their own lore. So I help people understand what's happening deeply inside of them. What is the mythos that they hold for themselves? What are the stories that they tell for themselves? Often it's something that is so intrinsic, it's so woven into their energetic pattern over years of repetition. It's not just repetition of thought, right? It's repetition of behavior. It's repetition of dynamics. It's repetition of other energetic entanglements. I mean, we're talking about it in terms of clients, but if you talk about it in terms of your family, that's a whole different dynamic there, right? It's much more embedded. And being able to see those and resolve them and free yourself and step out of them and understand that that is not me. I have full volition, full choice in life. I can be and literally embody whoever I choose to be and embody on this earthly plane is the most relieving and freeing experience for people.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And yeah, I mean, the work that you do is amazing. We're going to talk a bit more about it, so people can know where to go to find you. I love to ask at the end of all of the episodes if there is sort of one thing that the listeners could do today, this week, that can change how they experience their work energetically in accordance with this episode. What would that be? What's the one challenge we can set the listeners, or one thing that they could do this week that might shift how they see their work or themselves?
Yeah, I love that question. So understand that energy is not part of your work. Your energy is the work, if you like. Your energy is your business. So learning how to nurture that, learning how to support yourself is the easiest way for you to have a thriving business and aligned clients. Really, your energy is your bottom line. It is the underscoring of anything else that's going on. I think that's so important. The other thing I'd love people to know is that, especially as business owners, many women in particular can just drive themselves into the ground way more than they would if they were employed, right? They just keep going. And because you're in a situation where you are working deeply with somebody else's energy through essentially a portal, I would remember to allow yourself to be human during the day. When you leave a session, you can take a minute. It's okay. You don't have to be productive all the time. There's a level of energetic productivity that's happening within us that is just simply not going to be manifest immediately, but it will come through. It will come through later and with more power. Allow yourself that space. Practically, in terms of some tips that reflexologists can use is to support their own boundary setting whilst they may be working a few things out. One is to keep black tourmaline on them. A necklace, maybe wear a pendant, maybe keep it in your pocket, make sure you clear it regularly. There are all sorts of helpers out there, right? The crystal kingdom, huge sentient intelligence in the crystal kingdom. You've got your own guides, you've got other helpers who can come in, help you clear out your room and your own personal field. And, carrying a tourmaline or holding a tourmaline is one of the ways that you can help yourself do that. Another is that you don't sit directly in front of somebody's foot. Sit, if you can, where the foot is here, facing that way. So you have the person's leg, maybe it's on your lap and you can see what you're doing. Definitely don't sit in between the legs. You do not want somebody's energy coming directly at your heart or your solar plexus, your sacral, or your own root. So, if possible, sit outside. I don't know what reflexologists' sort of protocol is. I might be going against it, but if at all possible, sitting outside and having the foot on your lap with the sole facing into the space there will be more energetically supportive of you.
Wow, I'd be so interested to hear in the comments whether that resonates with people. And whether people already do that instinctively. I know that I've got my own way of treating clients that means that the feet aren't necessarily pointing straight towards my heart. So that did resonate with me. So Sanya, you said something before, and I am editing it slightly, but I feel like it's such a powerful sentence that feels like it is the full, could be the title of this whole podcast, which is energy. We don't work with energy. Our energy is the work. I feel like that will be quite a mindset shift for people. There's a lot of stuff out there about working about the energy in the room, working with the energy of the client, and actually to have that shift of that our energy is the work is empowering, powerful, and also really shifting a reflexologist perspective. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think what's so fascinating about the idea of mindset, for example, is that even that is arising from your energy. So being able to understand yourself and being able to manage your own energy and being cohesive and coherent in your energy is really what is then creating whatever you see around you.
Isn't that amazing?
Isn't that amazing? It never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah. I mean, what a beautiful way to kind of round off this podcast. Sanya, I could talk to you for ages, and I feel like a lot of the people listening will want to hear more from you. Can you explain kind of maybe in more detail how you work with people, women in particular, and also about your membership and where people can find you, please?
Yeah, I'd love to. So you can find me on Instagram to start with. And I have a membership, as you mentioned, called The Field, where we do 2 live calls a month. One is like an energetic mini masterclass and a shamanic healing, and the other is a coaching call where I coach everybody in the room and an integration workshop. And then I have astro guidance in between all of that. I also have something called the Energy Codex. So you move through from hesitation or waiting or stuckness or healing through a pivotal insight and into an active creation, into movement, into expansion every week. And then, of course, I have my one-to-ones, and I would love to speak to anybody who would like to talk to me about those.
I would just shout out about the field and about Energy Codex and just say that I am part of that. And it has been phenomenal. You know, I think that, yes, you are speaking to us through the means of Telegram, but the prompts and the journaling prompts and the thought processes that we go through, it feels really digestible. It feels some big workshops can feel completely overwhelming. I know we've all been, welcomed to those 7-hour workshops that some people put on. And actually, this isn't like that at all. This is really working within yourself and helping me understand the world around me and what's going on astrologically, energetically, and how that's feeding into my path has been really powerful. So just as a testimonial from someone who's already on it, I would definitely recommend it. I feel like, especially for reflexologists who are already quite open to this sort of work energetically, I think it's really kind of shifted the dial for me. So I hope it does for everyone else. Sanya, thank you so much for joining. It's been brilliant. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks so much, Meg.